We're gonna make it look fly with some DIY. We're gonna make it look fly with some DIY. We're gonna make it look fly with some DIY. Uh-oh, thrift diving.
Hey, what's up? It's Serena Pia from ThriftDiving.com, which is a do-it-yourself blog, YouTube channel, and podcast that helps you decorate, improve, and maintain your home with paint, power tools, and thrift stores without sacrificing your budget, the environment, or style. Welcome to episode 121 of the Thrift Diving Podcast. And I have to tell you, it feels so good to be back on these airwaves because I went on vacation and I was gone for 3 weeks. And if you haven't noticed, there were no new episodes. Believe me, I wanted to record, but when you're away on vacation, technically it was a vacation, but I had a lot of downtime. So I could have recorded, but I didn't have any of my equipment. And I wanted to wait until I got back because while I was there, and I went to Ghana, Africa. So if you remember from previous episodes, I told you that we were going to Africa. I didn't say when. You know, they say that you shouldn't put it out there to tell people when you're leaving on vacation. People are going to track you. How often does that really happen, right? Like most people really don't care about where you're going, when you're going. You know, if you've got that many nefarious people following you or friends, family that wants to do you harm, well, that's the bigger issue. So anyway, I took my husband's advice. I didn't really tell people when we were leaving, where we were leaving, but while I was in Ghana, I was posting pictures. If you follow me on Instagram, I've been posting clips and just trying to fill you in on my trip. So I couldn't really wait until I got back completely. But while I was there, I started having these deep, I don't want to say deep conversations with myself, but I started thinking about the meaning of home. And I wanted to talk in this episode about what I was able to perceive as being the real meaning of home. So a lot of the time when I was there, now we did multiple things. This was like a 3-week trip and we broke some of it down into, well, most of it was visiting family, but you know, we did a resort, we stayed at a hotel, we visited family. And so our trip was kind of broken down into 3 different sections. Well, one of the sections, one of the parts of our vacation was spending time with my husband's uncle, Uncle Sandy. He's got this beautiful house that overlooks the capital of Ghana, which is Accra. And the most jaw-dropping thing when I arrived, I didn't expect it to be so breezy. I mean, it was just amazing. It was like sitting on a beach, really. I mean, his house is up in like the hills. And so he catches a lot of that breeze from the Atlantic. You can sit on his patio, on his veranda, and literally look out in the far distance and see the Atlantic Ocean. So as I was sitting out there, drinking wine, drinking beer, because I did a lot of that on vacation, believe me, I started thinking about what this trip meant and started pondering the real meaning of home. So I did write a blog post about this. Some of you who are on my email list, you did receive this already. You can find the link down below if you want to read it. If you've not read it, it's a great read. And I started writing it while I was in Ghana. And then when I came back, I took the pictures, inserted it into the blog post, and kind of wrapped it up, summed it up. And that's why I kind of wanted to wait until I got back in order to share this with you, because I kind of felt like I needed to come full circle, right? Going from one home here in the US to Ghana, and then coming back home, what that whole trip meant to me. So anyway, as I'm sitting out on this breezy, beautiful veranda overlooking Accra in Ghana, I started thinking about home. Well, let me back up a little and tell you how this trip even came to be. So I would say early 2020, this was around January, we decided that we were going to spend some time that summer of 2020, in hubby's homeland. Now, he grew up in Ghana, not in the capital, but if you go about 4 or 5 hours northwest, there's another big city there called Kumasi. So he's from Kumasi, and so our plan was we were going to go to Accra, go visit family in Kumasi, and we were going to do all this in the summer of 2020. Well, this was one opportunity, or I should say missed opportunity, where procrastination actually worked to my favor, because weeks after discussing this idea, we were checking flights, the world shut down. COVID hit. we would have paid about probably $8,000 or $9,000 for those airfares. And I don't know what airlines were doing at that time, if they were allowing people to just reschedule those plane rides or if they were giving them reimbursements. I don't know. But you can imagine I heaved this financial sigh of relief that we were not $8,000 in the hole for flights that, I don't know about you, but it felt like Russian roulette to me. So if you board a plane, you're going to lose your life to COVID. I mean, that's what it felt like. So we didn't feel that we were ready to even travel until this summer of 2023. So we got comfortable with this idea of, okay, we're going to spend 3 weeks. That's a long time, most of July, gallivanting around Africa. We're going to visit family in the capital of Accra. We're going to go to some plush resorts, with pools so the kids feel like they're on vacation. We're going to connect with friends and family. And yeah, let's do this. Let's take this trip. And so as we were planning this trip, one of my objectives was I wanted the kids to see the rich, beautiful side of their African heritage that they got from their father. But I also wanted them to see what I called the suffering, right? Like in my mind, I didn't call it the suffering, but we would make comments, even my husband would, because he remembers what it's like for like a child or a person, period. But, for him, he was there for the first 11 years of his life. He remembers what it was like growing up and the things that he had to do, the responsibilities and, walking to school. That whole story your parents will tell you that they had to walk 3 miles to school and they didn't have shoes. Well, my husband's stories are not that far off. And so he sees and he knows a different way of life that my kids do not know. When their home is in a suburban area, their parents are not rich, but they're not poor, right? Maybe upper middle class. They're able to get them the things that they want. They're not spoiled, but when they ask and they really need it, it's not, okay, where are we going to pull this money from? It's like, okay, all right, let's go pay this $700 soccer season bill or whatever it is, right? Some crazy figure that it's not hurting you to pay. You don't like to pay it, but these kids don't know suffering. And so as I started thinking about this trip, I wanted my kids to see the suffering. But I started thinking, who am I to interpret another culture or lifestyle or home as suffering? But, I wanted my kids to experience a different lifestyle so that they never take for granted that which they're privileged to have here in America, right? I mean, that was what I was thinking, that they had privilege, right? To live in America, you've got privilege and it's so much better. And you're going to get to see, just imagine me pointing my finger at the kids. You're going to get to see how other people live. So you better appreciate what you have. And that's kind of how I was going into this, right? And I'm kind of recoiling at my words. I'm recoiling at the idea of bringing them and showing them, hey, this is what Africa's like. Aren't you happy you've got what you got at home? Because it makes it sound as if Africa is less than, that it's inferior, that other people's homes in Ghana, as we think we know, doesn't compare to home in America. And I think that is the problem. When we imagine or experience what someone else's home is, we draw inferences about the value and the worth of their home. So, for example, if someone's home is small, we think, oh, it must be inferior, right? Like they just have a small, modest home. It's not as big as my home, so mine's better. Or if it's on the wrong side of town, or it's in the wrong zip code, or if it's in the wrong country, it's undesirable. Or if it doesn't look like the cover of House Beautiful, if it doesn't have all the right furnishings, oh, that house is hideous, or it's outdated. Or sometimes we think the opposite, right? Like if somebody lives in a big house, we think, oh, they must be rich. They probably never have to worry about money. And same thing, if it's in the wrong country or wrong part of town, we think, well, that's not really the nice part of town. I live in the better area. And, there's so many inferences that we can draw from other people's homes based on our own biases. And I had my own biases. Now, if you're wondering, Had I been to Africa before? I did. I went in 2003. This was before we had children. So it was exactly 20 years. When we went in 2003, it was during the hot season. So it was like November, December. It was the dry season. The quote unquote rainy season. And I say quote unquote because it didn't rain a ton when we were there in Ghana. In the capital, didn't rain as much. It rained a little bit more when we got to the city of Kumasi. But let me tell you, that rainy season weather, if you ever want to visit Ghana, please go during like July, August, September. It is beautiful. Like the breeze coming off of the Atlantic, it feels so good. You feel like you're on a beach. And it feels amazing. So here in the US, most of the country we're going through like over 100-degree temperatures. But in Ghana, it was like a nice 82. I'm sitting on Uncle Sandy's veranda like, whew, this feels good. I'm sorry all those people in the US are suffering. So it was kind of great. It was kind of great being pleasantly surprised. But anyway, I started to just contemplate exactly what home truly means. And I had this a revelation. Sometimes I get those words mixed up. I had a revelation. This is what I realized. Home is wherever you feel most connected to the people that you love most. It is the place where your body and your soul are nourished. It's this place where you can't wait to leave. Hello. I was like, I'm going to be gone for 21 days. Yes. But then once you leave, you can't wait to return. That is what home feels like. Home is the place where you could navigate in complete darkness because you know its curves and edges like the back of your hand. And home is this place that you always want to return to. And when you do, you open the door with this renewed sense of wonder and comfort, right? All the things that you remember and feel connected to in your house. When you come back, it could even be a week. You still had a fantastic vacation, but you come back after a week and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm home. Look at my furniture. Look at my beautiful bedroom. Like, I can't wait to sleep in my own bed. I don't care where you go. There's always this sense of longing for home. And it doesn't matter if your home looks like it was styled by like a top HGTV designer or if it has dirt floors. Home is familiar. It's comfortable. And that's what I realized, that just because my home looked different than what a home in Ghana may have looked like, it doesn't mean that my home was better. Those people and the people that live here, we all crave our home because it's where we have the connection to our friends, our family. Regardless of what it looks like, it feels like home. One of the things that we did when we were there in Ghana in the capital, staying with his uncle, is we would get up at 4:30 in the morning. I know, it's insane. You think vacation, forget 4:30. You should be waking up at like 8:30, 9:30, sleep in, but we didn't. We actually woke up at 4:30. In fact, Uncle Sandy gets up at 4:30, maybe 3 or 4 times a week. Now, when I say he gets up and walks these hills of where he lives, Uncle Sandy is amazing. He is like 70. He just turned 74. He had his birthday while we were there, actually. And, you think 74, if you're a young person, you think, oh, 74 is old. 74, that's a senior citizen. There's nothing senior citizen about Uncle Sandy. So when he told us, yeah, I get up 3 or 4 times a week, 4:30, and, walk about 3 miles, we said, hey, we need to continue our walking and our exercise. We'll come with you. So as we walked these steep hills of his neighborhood, before the sun even rose, the one thing that I heard multiple times, and it really stood out to me, was the sound of African brooms swish, swish, swishing in the breeze. Now, when I say African brooms, I'm not talking about a broom that you can go to Family Dollar and buy, like a traditional broom that you use to sweep your floors. No, in Ghana, now they have those brooms, yes, but in Ghana and probably other African countries, I don't even know what material they use. It's some stem of a plant. And when you bunch them all together, it's actually, how can I explain it? It's actually very delicate. So if you had just one piece of this broom, it would break off. But what they do is they take a collection of them and they put a piece of rubber band or twine or something around it. And the part that's sweeping the ground is like, it works, but it's a very strong, durable broom when all of it is bundled up in such a way. So, but the thing is it's hard on your back. It doesn't have a long handle the way our brooms do, or the way a, traditional broom would. But this broom, I would hear it as we're walking through the hills of my uncle's neighborhood. And I would just hear swish, swish, swish. So before the day was even started, homeowners, well, actually it was probably housekeepers. It may not be the homeowners. You see, in Ghana, labor is super cheap. So most people, if you have a certain amount, if you live a certain lifestyle or have a certain amount of income or wealth, you probably have a housekeeper. And so it could be the housekeepers. But regardless of whether it was the homeowner or the housekeeper, as we're walking these hills, I would hear this swish, swish, swish of these brooms. And these were people tidying up their properties in the expectation of a new day. And this actually hit me because the first thing that came to mind was pride, right? Here in, and I'm recording this from Maryland and the United States, right? But whatever country you may be listening to this, maybe you're in Ghana, maybe you're in Canada, maybe you're in South Africa, whatever country that you're listening to this, we all have a sense of pride when it comes to our home. And that's what I realized as I was walking through these streets, is that it doesn't matter if you're living in a nice suburban 4-bedroom home in Silver Spring, Maryland, or if you've got a 1-room shack down an alleyway flanked by dirt and rubble. Because I'll tell you, as we were as we were walking down this, it's a dirt road leading to my uncle's house that's never been paved, right? And that's a whole other discussion. There's so many roads in Ghana that are paved, but then there's so many roads that are not paved. And I could go on and on and on about that and why the government is not making that more of a priority. But anyway, the road going to my uncle's house is not paved. And so while we were walking on that unpaved road near his house, I glance up this alleyway and it's flanked by dirt and rubble. And I see this man bending over with his African broom. And there was messy stones along this walkway. And what was he doing? He was leaning over and using this African broom to tidy up that morning. And it was about 6:30 in the morning. By the time it was probably about 5:30 by the time we passed that point, headed back to Uncle Sandy's house. But the word that leapt to my mind was pride. Because I realized that no matter if your home or your space is, this 1-room shack, or if it's a suburban home, or if it's a huge home like Uncle Sandy's house, your home is a place that should be treated with respect and love, because it deserves to be tended to carefully, because your home is a part of you. You should care for your home the way you care for your body. Our home is an extension, I feel, of our body, right? And when it's clean and when it's tidy, we feel mentally free and accomplished, and we can think again. We can feel happier and lighter. And, as I'm walking, I'm realizing these people have pride in their homes too, regardless of whether it's this huge home or it's this smaller home that doesn't have all the furnishings. Everybody feels or should feel pride in their home no matter what. And so that was kind of a poignant moment for me, just walking and hearing the sound of the African brooms cleaning up and preparing for the day. It's no different than what we do, right? You wake up, you come downstairs, hopefully you cleaned up the night before. But sometimes if you have kids like me, they will leave things out, and you wake up and you want to start your day with the crumbs off of the floor, or the dishes in the sink done, or making your bed. Those are all the things that we do to respect our home. And it doesn't matter if it's a home here, if it's a home in Ghana, if it's a home in London. We all have this desire to make our home be the best that it can be. And our home is a representation of our life's happiest and saddest, bittersweet moments, joyful memories. And, if you just stop a minute and just take a look around at your own home and survey the stories behind the rooms and the objects there, what pieces bring you joy when you look at them? Do you have memories of bringing your children home from the hospital there? Or maybe you met your grandkids for the first time in your home, or, heaven forbid, maybe your spouse passed a couple years ago, but you remember them sitting there on that sofa watching the news. Like, we all have these memories that flood our minds when we look at our home, when we think about home. And it doesn't matter so much how affluent our home is. We all have these memories and these things that are very intimate. Our homes are very intimate. And so we need to respect that regardless of what it looks like or where it is, right? But I'll tell you, one of my favorite moments and memories is when I think about when my kids were little. And I have some video clips of this too. They would just laugh and giggle and toss themselves around on the floor and just have such a good time. And I would stand there recording them, just watching. And, it's a little sad now when you look, because the only time they come to the kitchen now is when they're looking for snacks, right? They've got these huge 10 to 13 size man feet. And that's the only time they come to the kitchen is when they're looking for snacks. They're not coming there to play and interact and, tease each other. I mean, sometimes they do, but for the most part, they're in their respective corners of the home. But this is what my home was. It's a place for them to grow up. It's a place for me to look around and remember those joyful moments. And you probably have those intimate spaces and stories in your home too. And guess what? People in Ghana have their stories as well, regardless of what their home it looks like, regardless of where their home is located. And I'll tell you, one thing that was very interesting that I noticed in Ghana is that, and this is probably true of, I guess this can be true of homes anywhere for the most part, but this is one thing that I really noticed is that you'll have areas where there's some big, beautiful homes, and some of them are just being built. Like, you can see some of them are in the midst of development. But then you see just maybe 100 yards away, or I should say 100 meters. They don't use yards in Ghana. We're like the only country that uses like yards. Everybody else is using meters. But you'll see 100 meters down the road or 50 meters down the road, there's a lot more poverty. And there's this huge disparity that I feel like in this country, or at least let me just take my neighborhood for the most part. All the surrounding areas, all the surrounding homes in my neighborhood are pretty much the same, right? And it's probably true for your neighborhood too, right? Maybe you live on an upper end of maybe an upper class neighborhood. Maybe you live, kind of middle class, whatever your home is. You probably are surrounded by homes that are very similar to you. But I felt like in Ghana, there was a lot of disparity that you see so close together, where you'd have big, beautiful homes, and then you go just right down the street, or sometimes it's even separated by a wall, and then suddenly you have really impoverished areas. And I'll tell you, we stayed at a resort. Actually, no, it wasn't a resort. This was the hotel. It was called Sweet Garden Hotel. This was actually a nice hotel in Kumasi. And oh my gosh, I'll tell you at the end, I'll tell you the story of how we even got the top level apartment. That was crazy. But when you went out on the balcony and you looked down below, you saw the beautiful lush gardens of the hotel. It was very nice. But when you looked a little further out, there was this concrete wall, maybe about 6 feet tall, and it separated the hotel land from a neighborhood. And when I say a neighborhood, this was like what you would traditionally, I don't want to say traditionally, but this is what you would think an impoverished community in, Africa would look like. That's what it looked like, right? I mean, I just couldn't believe there was such a disparity between this expensive hotel and this impoverished community. But the thing that was striking to me, and I actually recorded a little bit of this, is that when you looked over there and you zoomed in, I had my camera and I was zooming in with my phone, there were children playing. They were jump roping. There were children playing soccer. There were parents sitting out and doing laundry or whatever it is that they were doing. People were happy. They were happy. And so it further, I'll tell you, I had already started writing this blog post and thinking about this concept of home before we had gotten to the Sweet Garden Hotel. So when we had gotten to that hotel and I noticed that disparity separated by a concrete wall, I thought, oh my gosh, like it's crazy. But when I looked over there and I saw the life and the smiles of the children and the jumping rope together and just playing and running through the area, the neighborhood, they looked happy. They looked happy. Now, I don't know what their experiences were. I don't know if they have something to compare. I don't know if they look over to the hotel and think, wow, that's a huge building. Look how much different that looks than where I'm living. I don't know. But all I can tell you is that home is probably all that they've known. And they looked happy. The children were outside playing. The little girls were doing the jumping rope. The boys were playing soccer. And who was I to say, wow, I bet you they feel like they're missing out? What if they're not missing out? We know that, okay, yes, hopefully they have running water. I don't know if they do. But even if they don't, what if they're still happy? What if we're taking our understanding of what we think is happiness and placing it upon somebody else to say, oh, well, that they can't be happy. They're living in that condition or in that side of town. Like, no, they can't be. But what if they are? What if they have intimate connections in that community? What if they have, and I'm sure they do, because you do, right? What if they have the same feeling about their home, that sense of pride that you have? Home, as I said, home is the place where you feel you have the connection to the people that love you. And they have memories and they will walk into their space in their neighborhood. Some of those little kids living there may one day grow up and move to the capital and maybe have a bigger home and have more stuff. But guess what? They'll probably always look back on their childhood with some memories of the connection and the intimate spaces and the memories that they've had. It's kind of a lot, right? Like when you start thinking about it. And this is what I was trying to explain to my children as we were there, that it's not about our house, our location, our country being better. It is, we all have this sense of intimacy about our homes, no matter where we live. Home is where your body and soul are nourished by the people who love you most. And I can tell you that those children, they looked happy. And I bet you their parents loved them just as much as my mom loved me. Anyway, as we walk through some of these neighborhoods, as I mentioned, some of these homes were just $1 million-esque mansions. And then you saw impoverished homes. So that's one thing that, I don't know, I couldn't wrap my mind around how there could be so much disparity just in that short of a distance. But this one day we were walking by and I saw children playing with discarded items. I don't even know what it was. It was like a piece of, I don't know, like a piece of metal. Not a piece of metal, but it was, I can't even describe it. But they were playing with some discarded items and they were happy. And another neighborhood we were walking through, there were teams of boys coming together. And this was actually a couple times we saw this, but it looks like on a Sunday afternoon, people would just kind of file around and watch these soccer games taking place. And these boys were having fun playing on, it wasn't a traditional soccer field, not in some of these neighborhoods, but they were having fun. These were communities of people that were coming together for connections. These were their homes. This was their neighborhoods, and likely the only home that they've ever known. And the smiles of joys on their faces in no way signified that their experiences were any less valuable than my own experiences. So who are we to judge someone else's home as less than because we feel that we're more privileged? I don't think it should be like that. You should look around your own home and community. Do you feel a connection? Do you have stories about its landmarks and its furnishings and its residents? And of course you do. We all do. It doesn't matter if you're in America or Africa. I think home is a part of the collective human experience, right? And it's this very intimate experience that should be honored no matter where your geographical location. And, by the end of this, I realized the lesson that we should be teaching our children is not that our home in America is better, but rather it's different. And there are certain importances that I think should be highlighted. Like, yes, you should have access to clean and plentiful water for drinking and bathing. And from what I had seen in Ghana, yes, for the most part, most people do. But I also saw people having to go and fetch water. They had to go and fetch water. My husband remembers being, 10, 11 years old, and he had to go fetch water. And he said, remember, this is not just going to get one bucket, right? The water that you go and fetch is the water that you're going to be using for your cooking, your bathing, for all the needs that you're going to have for the day. You got to go and do that. And he saw people going to fetch water, and he pointed out to me, you know what? I had to do that. We should be teaching our kids that in spite of how different our homes are and how different the environment may be from, let's say, America to Africa, what matters most is about the love inside of that home, the familiar surroundings and the connection to the community. So it was eye-opening to me. And I don't know if my kids really grasped that. I tried to explain it to them, and then, their eyes kind of glazed over. But, I'm hoping, even with the blog post, even with this podcast episode, I'm hoping that one day maybe they will listen to it and understand and appreciate the experience that they were offered. There was a lot of really cool things that we did over there in Ghana. My husband's aunt, which is his mom's sister, her husband, so his uncle, is a chief. And one of the really great experiences was being able to sit down with him and talk to him and understand what being a chief means. So he's a chief. There's a lot of chiefs in Ghana, and some of these chiefs will be a chief for a particular area, for a particular region. But there's a king, right? This king of the Ashanti people, that's the tribe my husband belongs to. I think he's probably the most important king in all of Africa, the way it was explained to me. My husband's uncle, the chief, actually set it up so that we could meet him during one of these ceremonies. They have a traditional celebration ceremony there called Akweside, and it takes place, from my understanding, every 6 weeks. And that's a time for the chiefs to come together to kind of talk about what's, it's not a political thing, but they get together and they kind of talk about they observe tradition, right? So the chiefs are the ones that their focus is to maintain culture and uphold the African beliefs of the Ashanti people. So he was able to place a call. So we were actually able to meet the chief. And the way this is explained to me, not the chief, the king, this king, he is, as they explained it, he's more important than like the U.S. president. It would be like, 10 times meeting the U.S. president. That's how this man is regarded in Africa. And so we were able to meet the king. We were able to go to this event, Akweside. We caught some of it, and seeing my children being able to see that there's a different way of life. There's different cultural practices, and this is your heritage. This should be cherished and respected. It shouldn't be looked down upon like, oh, that's not what we do in America, so it's less than. No, this is a cultural practice that should be respected. And I just love that I was able to get to see that. We also went to a school. Now, my husband's aunt and cousin, they actually started a school. They started building this school. It's called the Lucien Community School. They started building this about 18 years ago. It took them that long to finally finish the building. And I think for the past year or so, they've had their first enrollment of students. So this was one of the most cool experiences. We got to go to her school and she took us around on a tour. We got to meet all the little kids from like kindergarten up to grade 5. And it was so amazing how respectful these kids were. I mean, if you go into any classroom here in America, right? For the most part, the kids would probably be respectful. You know, you go in and the teacher says, oh, you know, hey, students, we have a visitor. And they would just kind of look at you and maybe they'd say, hi. But when we walked into these classrooms, these students, let me tell you, they stood up immediately. And they, you know, I said hi to them and they're like, and this is in unison. Hello, how are you? I am fine. You know, they have been trained to be respectful and courteous in a way that our students here, we just don't teach kids how to be this way. And, you know, talking to his cousin and learning about the curriculum that she's trying to instill in these children. So she's one of the founders of the school, one of the owners, but she's also the principal of the school and a teacher. And so she's telling me about the curriculum, and some of the things that they even teach them were things that we don't do here. She said, we'll have a session on table manners because, you know, these kids may not have learned proper table manners, but we want to give them the skills that it takes for them to be successful in the world. So they may be in a situation where, you know, they're meeting with, I don't know, like they're in a situation, I'm thinking fast forward, but let's say they're in a meeting with, I don't know, like some president of a company or something later in life. They will have been trained properly on how to eat with a fork and knife. And what's really funny is that after that, and when she told me that this is one of the things that they're teaching the kids how to do, I said to my kids, we were sitting there eating, and I said, you know, how you're using that fork and knife, that's not really how you're supposed to do it. So I said, here, to my 11-year-old son, here, let me show you how to do this properly, because I see you're trying to cut this piece of food. Let me show you how to do this. And do you know, my son refused to listen to me. He just pretended that I wasn't even talking to him, right? Like rude. Whereas with these kids, they're like little sponges. They're soaking it up. They want to learn these things. And, you know, I told my son, this is embarrassing. Like if you go somewhere to, you know, where you have to represent yourself, you're going to be eating like you've never even learned. And here I'm trying to tell you because I see you're doing something wrong. Let me tell you. And he was not receptive to it. He was not receptive. So when she told me that, you know, they were learning how to have proper etiquette and really training these kids to have courtesy and respect, I thought, oh my gosh, maybe I need to like send my kids to school in Ghana. I told her, please, this land that you have on the other side of your school, build something that's like middle school, high school. I will send my kids here. But it was a great experience. And, you know, after 21 days of connecting with extended family, it was time to come home to America. And I have to admit, when it got to like day 19, 20, I didn't want to have anything to do with Ghana. Like I didn't want to go and see any more family. I didn't want to go to any museums. I didn't want to do anything but just count down the hours because I started missing home. And I was looking forward to coming back to my suburban home in the DMV, the District, Maryland, VA metropolitan area. So as the plane made its final descent into Dulles, which is in Northern Virginia, we were coming off the walkway. I was tired because, you know, this straight flight is like 10 hours and it left at about 11:30 p.m. Ghana time. So, you know, that was already past my bedtime. And by the time we arrived, it was 5, 6, maybe 6:30 in the morning. So I hadn't slept that much. But even though my eyes were red, my contacts were dry, you know, I was excited. I was looking forward to being home. And I just couldn't wait to just, you know, experience all the things that I was used to experience and just having my routine back. You know, I had a newfound appreciation for things like consistently paved roads, right? And traffic laws. Traffic in Ghana, oh my gosh, it is insane. There are traffic laws, but nobody really abides by them. It's sort of, you've got one main artery and everybody is headed in that direction. And it's almost like a game of chicken. So if you choose to continue going, you hope that the other person will stop, but it's almost like you don't know if they're going to stop. So you just keep going. And if they stop, they stop. If they don't, you have a fender bender. Thankfully, we didn't have any fender bender while there. But there were times when there were some close calls and I just, ooh, man, yeah. Sometimes you just had to look the other way because you had to trust that the person driving knew exactly how to drive in those conditions. I missed pizza, right? One of the things that we had discovered is that of the 3 places that we had pizza, none of the pizza had well-cooked crust. And I don't know if it's just how they do pizza in Ghana. I don't know. But all the crust was just undercooked. And so the kids and I were like, well, yeah, we're kind of looking forward to Papa John's and, Squisito pizza. Another thing we kind of missed too is being able to have plenty of hot water. A lot of the places that we stayed, if you had, like, for example, in the hotel, they had a small hot water heater in each room. So, it wasn't like there was one big hot water heater for the entire hotel. You had your individual hot water heater and there wasn't that much hot water. So if you had 2 people showering, the first person's going to get the most hot water. Second person, it's going to be kind of lukewarm. So, these are things that of course you have something to compare them to, but over time you get used to it, right? Like the pizza wasn't that bad. Yes, we have something to compare to, but it wasn't that bad. The paved roads, some of them were pretty bad. But overall, by the time we got to, I would say probably 2/3, maybe halfway through our trip, it started to feel like we didn't even notice. We didn't even notice that there were certain roads that were not paved or that, you had to kind of make detours when you're driving some of the roads because there might be a huge pothole. And so you just have to go around it. We got used to being there. Ghana started feeling comfortable, right? Like we just sort of blended into everything around us. Now, despite being happy to have finally arrived home and getting back to the coziness of my routines, there is also a bittersweet longing that I have for the experiences that we have in Ghana, right? Like this warm familial connection that we developed with his aunts and uncles. I can tell you some of the best times that I had there were talking to his aunts and uncles, all of which are in their late 60s to 70s, right? Like, let's say 68 to probably about 75. And the stories that they had to tell, the culture that they were conveying to us, the practices that were important to them, the traditional things that were important to them, or sometimes even traditional things that they felt didn't make sense. I sat there listening, interested. I asked a lot of questions. At some point, I wish that I had recorded some of these conversations that I had with these people, because I thought, when these aunts and uncles pass, who's going to be the next generation to pass on the stories and the cultural practices, right? Like, I'm happy that my children have an opportunity to hear this and listen. They may not fully understand or appreciate it, but at least they're being able to meet these people that are that's their family, right? These are the ancestors of our family, of my husband's family. And that's what I miss. There was one moment when we had all gone over to his aunt's house and she had made some, what was it? It was like fried yams. So we all and we weren't planning to be there very long. She just wanted us to come back and get some of the yams. And so we piled into her kitchen and she had just finished making the yams, put them on the table with some dipping sauce. And it just felt so warm and comforting to have these aunties in the kitchen making food. They're talking in their native Tree language. Tree, TWI, is one of the languages spoken by the Ashanti people in Ghana, and most of which I didn't understand. But you don't have to really understand it to know that it was a comforting moment where you had all this love, right? They made this food for you and you're enjoying the food and they're laughing and joking and you've got these young children, my children, being able to experience that. I don't know. In that moment, I wanted to remember that moment. So I snapped pictures, I recorded video. But it's something I'll always remember is that warm familial connection that we had. And I think that's one of the things that I'll miss. I'll also miss the exquisite beach-like breeze. Oh my gosh. Sitting out on Uncle Sandy's veranda overlooking the Capitol, that was my favorite part. I wished that I had a veranda that I could sit out and enjoy this breeze, and it was just so nice. And I actually will miss our 4:30 morning walks. I was really surprised that there were so many people that got up in the morning to walk this hill, right? These hills were they're crucial. I mean, you saw bikers, you saw people jogging it, and I can't even tell you what the elevation was, but it was high elevation. And by the time you get to the top, you're feeling like you just climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. At least that's how I felt. I also miss the delicious street donuts and the peanuts. Oh my gosh. So while we were there, we had gotten these delicious donuts. And I think some of them, there's a couple of varieties. Some are really soft and some are hard. So I had both. I had the hard ones. I had the soft ones. Delicious. Oh my gosh. And of course, here I am wearing this glucose monitor on my arm. And if you don't remember me talking about being pre-diabetic, go back to, I'll leave it down in the show notes. But while I was in Ghana, I still wore my glucose monitor, making sure that whatever I ate didn't fully spike my glucose. But yeah, when I ate those donuts, I was like, you know what? I will take a sugar spike for these donuts. They were so delicious. And the peanuts that they had there are not like the peanuts here. Like they were just 10 times more flavorful. I don't know what kind of peanuts those were, but they were good. And, I think I'll miss seeing the numerous street vendors, right? Like you would go into an area and you would just see street vendors everywhere. You'd even see street vendors walking through the traffic, like that mayhem of traffic. People walking through selling everything from chargers, from baby blankets, donuts, like just everything. But we actually bought like some shea butter and vegetables, and just seeing them sitting out on the street, I don't know, it just felt really good walking those streets and stopping and buying the things that you want to buy. It's not like going to Costco, and I enjoy going to Costco, but it wasn't like going to Costco and then going in and buying a whole cart full of things. Like, you have specific vendors you go to where they're selling the best peanuts and the best street peanut butter. You find your ones that you like and you kind of stick to them. And I'm not a big drinker, but I will definitely miss the bottles of wine and the Ghanaian beer. The Ghanaian beer there is called Club. I think it used to be called Star Beer 20 years ago, but I guess now it's called Club. And every family member we went to, they always offered beer. The kids drank so much soda. Here in the US, they don't really get soda like that. But because there you're either drinking bottled water, soda, or beer, right? Like you don't drink the tap water because if you do, you're going to end up in the bathroom. So everything, every house we went to, everything was the bottled water, soda, malt drinks, beer. And of course, I'd go for the beer. My kids would go for the Fanta. And that's kind of the pattern that we established. Thankfully, when we got back, we killed that pattern of behavior. So now it's back to the water for me and for them. And the food, oh my gosh, I cannot tell you how much the food was delicious. So Uncle Sandy, he has a cook. Her name was Auntie Pat. And she would make these authentic Ghanaian meals with jollof rice and like a tomato-based sauce. And she made us, is it banku? I think she made us like banku with, just so many things. I can't even think of everything off the top of my head. But the kids actually loved it. And we sat down every day, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner that when we were there at Uncle Sandy's, and we ate together. And Uncle Sandy enjoyed it too. He lives there alone for the most part, not all the time. His kids kind of travel. But when we were there, he's like, yeah, I'm eating at the table. Normally I eat in my room, so it's kind of nice to eat at the table. So we shared meals together as a family. And even just getting to know all of his aunts and uncles on a deeper level through visiting them, conversation, asking questions over food and drink, it just felt so good connecting with family. And while this wasn't a cheap vacation by any means, I mean, the airfare alone for 5 direct flights, we flew United, was just over $8,000. And that's not including the resort fee, the hotel fee, the time or the money we spent, buying food out when we were at the hotel and we didn't have Auntie Pat's cooking. But what we got in return was a deeper connection with our family and with my husband and children's roots. And I think this is a trip that we'll never forget. I think it was worth the cost. But here's one thing that's really interesting. As I started thinking about this whole trip and as I was writing about it and recollecting my experiences, I had a poignant thought that Ghana has now become my second home, the place where I felt connected and loved. In fact, his uncle, the one who's a chief, he and I had such a connection. He actually gave me a new Ghanaian name. That's right. So in Ghana, the day that you're born is your given name, right? Now you will meet people that have traditional, like I say traditional names, but then you'll also have like an American name, right? So you might have like a Charles or something like that, but they have a Ghanaian name. Well, he asked me, well, what day were you born? I was born December 13th, 77. So he looks it up on his phone and he said, oh, that's a Tuesday. So you are Abena. So that is your new name. I'm giving you a Ghanaian name, Abena. So then he says, I'm going to give you my last name as your middle name. Now, his name was Nana Osei Poku. Osei is a very common name. That's the male version of the name. And Sewa is the female version of Osei. So my new name, guys, is Abena Sewa. I have been renamed. So he was telling everybody. And so now my mother-in-law, when she calls me, my mother-in-law lives here in the U.S., she'll say, hello, Abena Sewa, how are you? So the whole family knows me as Abena Sewa now, but you can still call me Serena. But I connected with him so deeply, and he wanted to give me a Ghanaian name, So I thought that was pretty cool. And in fact, I'll tell you that my husband's family had started building a family house in Ghana years ago. This is after his father had passed in 2007. And the family, he had already started building the home right outside of Kumasi. He'd already started building the home, but he hadn't gotten very far. And so when he had passed, the family decided, well, we're going to continue on with his legacy and what he wanted to do. So we actually went and visited that house. And right now it's got its red brick. It's got some of the wiring done, but it still needs to get plaster of Paris ceiling. It's got to get tile flooring. So my husband has kind of dedicated himself to making sure that this house gets done. And who knows, maybe one day next year, you'll get to see me in this house doing a thrift diving makeover. Who knows? I don't know. But regardless, what we know for sure is that at some point in 2024, 2025, we will have a family home to call home in Ghana. That will be for, myself, my children, the brother-in-laws, like the entire family will have a family home to call Ghana, a family home to call home in Ghana. And I do look forward to returning there to home in a couple of years. So I got 2 homes now. Anyway, that is what I wanted to share with you. I want you to think about what you think of as home. And when you think of home in different countries, what that means for them. And do you have a little bit of bias where you seem to think that your home, maybe here in the U.S., is better than homes abroad? I think we're kind of limited. And I think this is why it's important for people to travel and see what home is like for other people so that you have a greater appreciation for your home and for their home. And you may find that there's a lot of other countries, a lot of other continents where home can be just as good, if not better, than your own home. As long as it's filled with the people that love you and your community of people that you feel a part of. All right, guys, that's what I got for you today. Please come back next week. I don't know what we'll be talking about, but whatever it is, it's going to be a great conversation. All right, I will see you next episode.
Diving. Find it ugly, make it pretty. Paint the power tools, alright. Saving money with those